Hello. I had actually been intending to make this video for a while now, but I am exceedingly lazy and kept procrastinating. But here we are now, talking about the upcoming balance changes, my thoughts, how impactful I think the updates will be, to the game, and just to, summarize, the general gist of this particular balance patch. It's a lot smaller in scope and less impactful than normal, if we're being real here. If we want to compare to the previous balance patch notes, right? You can see that, well, in the previous one, we had Jacko, who is incredibly meta impactful. We had Summer Break Charlotte, who enables a lot of cleave. Spirit Eye Celine, Little Clean Charlotte. All of these are a pretty substantial, in meta shifting buff. In addition to Sharoon, is potentially the most impactful for standard gameplay, at least. To not go, just to give a surface level observation here. This is a very impactful balance patch. And even before that, we had Last Strider Crow buff. If you play RTA, you probably see a lot of this guy. In addition to Lilius, who was a pretty solid answer to Lua if they are not on that target artifact, Song of Stars. And I don't know, this one wasn't super impactful either, but it had a lot of. This one's probably more impactful than the other one, honestly, for looking at just Last Strider Crow's meta presence in RTA at least. It's not super relevant in Guild War. I'll probably be giving a little bit of perspective from both game modes because I do play both game modes. But this is still a decent one. Ilinov got a pretty respectable buff. She's usable now, whereas she probably wasn't nearly as usable before. But if we're just comparing that to this. Oh right. And this one also had Architect Leica as a part of it. It was in a separate post, but Architect Leica got buffed at the same time as the Last Strider Crow and whatnot. And she is just a menace to society as a last pick if you don't have much speed in your draft, right? She just one taps one of your carries and it's kind of ogre. But yeah. So if we compare that to the impact of those patch notes to this one, there's really only one substantial change, and that is the Lionheart Thermia here. If you want a TLDR, this is probably the only very substantially meta shifting buff here, and everything else honestly feels kind of like filler. Maybe some of them will be better than you think, but really it's just the Lionheart Thermia buff patch. And this is probably for a couple of reasons. For starters, well, there are two reasons that kind of just tie into the same thing. And this is the patch that I believe Epic 7 World Cup is going to be played on, right? And I think with ML Landy coming out on the same time that these that this patch goes live, right? They just don't want to shift the meta too much, right? So they're not trying to impact things too much. So just one substantial buff kind of makes sense, I guess. But at the same time, it's kind of lame, right? What can you do? So yeah, that's the TLDR of things. But let's just go through just from the top down, and I'll give my impressions, how they changed the character, and if I will be building the character myself, and what a build of that character looks like. So to start off, we do have Ruele, who's she's been around for a long time, and I don't think this buff is really going to bring her into relevance too much, right? It's obviously, it's throwing her a small bone. So what they've done is, for starters, is they've changed her S1 to heal based off of her max health instead of an ally's max health, which I think that's a pretty solid buff. pretty much the only time you ever see Ruele is drafted with a solo carry like Remnant Violet, and I guess, you know, that's relevant. You can heal him a little bit more, I guess, but it's not like going to make people go, oh, I'm drafting Ruele now. And she's also sometimes used in some Guild War comps for her S3 with Dark Corvus. But they're also changing her S2 to give her 25% CR when she presses it, which, I mean, I guess, you know, is kind of relevant, I guess. It's not like super relevant or anything though, because like, her S2 has a 3-turn cooldown, so every 3 turns you get 25%, like a quarter of a turn of cooldown reduction for your other abilities, which I guess it's okay. It's like, it feels like nothing essentially, especially if you're comparing her to Destina, who, you know, that's probably the mostly like the closest Soul Weaver. Like, they've got similar base stats and they've got similar kits as well, which I guess makes sense because Ruele's the ML5 version of Destina, but I'd say Destina is the better unit by far, because her S2, it heals and it pushes the unit she heals, and it's 1 turn lower cooldown. So it's like, how often are you going to be picking a Destina, I mean Ruele, over Destina, right? And her S3 also revives your whole team potentially and gives her 60 free ER of stats on the first turn. I think it's kind of crazy how you know, power level differences. Now granted, Ruele's S3 revive is potentially more, substantially more valuable than Ruele's, but still, it's the S2 utility difference is just absurd. Like, I think they could okay, no, they can't like reduce the S2 cooldown by a turn, but like, they could give it, they could make this push by 25%, right? You know, whoever they're using, instead of it just increasing the combat readiness of the caster, right? And that might be bring her into relevance even. You know, obviously it just feels like they're cheaply knocking off a Destina at that point, but whatever, right? Like, if that's what it takes to make Ruele feel relevant, go for it. But yeah, I don't think she'll be seeing much more play than she currently is now. Yeah. And then here is the big dog, and this change to Lionheart makes me feel like they do actually, you know, to some extent pay attention to what the top level issues are. And currently one of the top level issues in RTA at least is Solitaria. And you might think, you know, intuitively that Lionheart Ceremia currently already counters Solitaria. You know, that might be what you're thinking. But the problem is, Solitaria is generally built so fast that she just laps the Lionheart, either strips the death buff, or outright stuns her before she can press her S3. And it's like, it makes Lionheart essentially just a dead pick most of the time. Now, I'm not sure if this is the right way to go about solving this, but it definitely does solve it, right? So now, whenever Lionheart procs, she gains 20% increased combat readiness, which that is kind of crazy. Now, whenever Solitaria, well, I guess looking solely at Solitaria, but whenever Lionheart procs, she is cutting your team almost certainly, and she is going to get the S3 off, whose damage is now also increased. Now, I think this lets her become pickable into, like, she might become a cleave unit now, straight up. Because, if you think about it, imagine you pick her with Ran, and now suddenly, if your opponent, well, into somebody that picked Ed into your Ran, and it's like, well, now that Ed is going to just be boosting your Lionheart out, and then your Lionheart is going to be cutting your enemy's team, and she's just going to be killing them. It's like, well, jeez, I just got cleaved by Lionheart. What fun! You know, as a Guild Wars player, I can't really complain about a Lionheart buff. Granted, she is a gear gap unit and is kind of troll if you are. This is not troll if you're using her, but if you do get, it is. She can lose if you get unlucky. Like, obviously that would never happen to me in my infinite gear score Lionheart, which, you know, here's what I'm currently running. Oh, I got the music player open for the background music. I don't think I have enough on the playlist though. But this is currently what I've been running for a while. It's a pretty high gear score Lionheart. Like, let's be real here. It's 436 on a crit chance neck. With SSS imprint, so these aren't necessarily the most easily attainable stats on lifesteal, but a build I see a lot of people going nowadays is actually, you know, maybe similar stats to this without the ER, and then plus 60 crit damage from destruction set on Golden Rose instead of Draco Plate for healing, which as a pretty strong build. Like 60 additional crit damage, you know, that put her at like 320 crit damage, 2.2k defense. Right, that is going to be tactically nuking a lot of people right now, and imagine that after the buff with however much damage increase they give her. So, you know, just a food for thought if you want to go for a more damagey build. It does exist, people are currently running it in RTA, but you know, I like the lifesteal build just because it lets you run a damage reduction artifact on her like the Draco Plate. Yeah, definitely the most impactful unit from this update, at least. Then moving on, we have Haste. I don't know. I mean, it is a buff, I guess, but does it really change how he is played? Like, what they say is, let me confine it. It increases his. Right now he has trouble maintaining decreased defense debuff on a single target during prolonged battles. But like, you're using haste. Are you going for a prolonged battle? Like, it doesn't change anything, right? Like, haste. If you're using haste, you're cleaving, like, straight up. His S3 is essentially ran S3, except it can't be counterattacked. To just summarize it. So now they're giving his S1 a death break, and they're making one of his EEs, the cooldown reduction, they're just baking that into his kit, which, fair enough. Makes him more usable in PvE, I guess. But if I don't know, I thought these patch notes are more of supposed to be PvP orientated updates. So haste just simply cannot be built in a way where like that encourages main like a prolonged battle. Like he can't be built in the way for that, because he needs to make a critical hit. He is a thief, so he needs a crit chance neck, and he has low base stats to begin with for building bulky. So it's like, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, you know, I mean, if you use him in like green expos, I guess, or I guess that's literally it, or maybe some labyrinth. This is a solid buff for you. But in terms of PvP usability, if people weren't using him before, even though he has a very strong S3, I doubt people are going to be using him now. Next we have Tenebria, who has a similar identity crisis to the Haste. So she's got damage awakenings, but her kit is like slow control. But they've done the similar thing where they've given the cooldown EE to her kit, and if we just want to look at her other EEs really quickly here, just in the journal, because I don't see here. So now, you probably would have only been running this S3 EE before, but now you have, you have got more options now. You can run the sleep cooldown. Alright, I mean the sleep chance, so her S3 has a 100% chance to sleep, I believe, with the Maximolas. Or you can run the Dispel one if you're running like a counter set. Or what is this one? Gab? Gab's kind of weird, right? But she does, like I mentioned, and this is a part of her identity crisis, right? She has damage awakenings, right? So you want to build her damage, right? Well, I mean, if you don't have effectiveness on her, isn't she kind of useless? But if you're building her effectiveness, don't you want her kind of bulky? Well, how are you going to get her kind of bulky when she has 4.8k base HP? Like, I don't know. It feels bad to build, like, a unit like this on a slower type build. But maybe that's just my perspective. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. She does have a very strong S3, don't get me wrong. Like, AoE 100% sleep trench is very good, but when both Hand Guy and Last Rider Crow are in essentially every game, like, when is that going to be used? Like, never. Like, they just put up immunity and suddenly your kit is useless? Yeah, okay. It sounds like fun. Like, I don't know. Now, maybe this is better. Like, they also, I don't know, is this even a buff with the imprint change? Like, they made it so, she has effectiveness imprint? I honestly think dual attack chance as a self imprint is way stronger, especially after they changed the base dual attack chance to 3%, right? So this would get you up to 9% dual attack chance with that S1 EE. That sounds better than 27% effectiveness to me, at least, if you do have an SSS1 for some reason. But yeah, I again, just like Haste, I think she just does too much of an identity crisis to be substantially usable. And next we have Mort, who maybe can be usable. He's definitely stronger now. So Mort's kind of in a weird spot where he just doesn't follow up on his own damage enough. So unlike Ilinov, who she injures things and then she does a boatload of damage after she injures things, Mort just kind of injures things and then maybe death breaks. Like, his S3 is like his main drawing point, right? You might think the S1 is impactful, but like I mentioned earlier, with LRK and Hand Guy in essentially every game, his S1 isn't really that relevant, even though it has an ignore ER death break on it. Because the S1 itself does very little damage, and then you need your team to have the tuning to follow up on the S1 death break, but it's only like a 50% chance or so. I don't know. I guess giving your team the anti-crit is pretty nice with a 100% chance off of the S1. You know, I can't deny that. But I just really can't see him being used a lot, right? Because, like, if you want to injure something and you want a grass unit, you just pick Alencia, right? Or there's maybe the off chance that you can pick more into like something like Pirate Flan, because he does have the immune to stun and sleep thing going for him. But I feel like that's just bait most of the time, because they just kill the rest of your team, and then they just kill Mort, and it's like, well, that was fun. I did no damage with my S1s and pressed S3 once, but my whole team is controlled by Pirate Flan now. Woohoo! I mean, maybe he'll be used. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. But yeah, I mean, if you already were using him, you're definitely happy with this buff, because a 3-turn cooldown on the S3 with the injury, maybe you can stack it up pretty quickly if they don't have a high barrier uptime. or they are picking in a way where they lose to getting AoE injured by a grass unit. But again, like I said, can't you just use Alencia at that point? Okay, now that is the 5 stars out of the way, and we are on to 4 stars in Silk. I don't know what this is for, really, honestly. Like, I guess this is definitely a buff for Silk, but was anybody using a Silk? Let's ask ourselves that really quick. No. Is anybody going to be using Silk now that she's updated? No, probably not. Like, I really don't know. So, she has to be attacked, and then she dispels 1 debuff from her, which I guess is kind of cool. But, I mean, she then uses, also wants this focus, he use a different, like, attack thing, which is kind of weird. And she has 4-star base stats, and I don't know, I just don't think, this is going to do anything to make her relevant, just because Silk just doesn't have a good kit, right? To begin with. Maybe I'm wrong, and the 10% combat readiness decrease is super relevant, but this just feels like another PvE update, if you want to call it that. Yeah, I'll just write it off as PvE update and be surprised when she is the most insane unit in the game. But yeah, I don't think there's much to talk about with her. Now we are on to a ML 3-star in Suthan, where they are giving him a defense on his stacking thing. So generally speaking, when they buff a 3-star to give them a little bit of extra oomph, it means they're getting a specialty change soon. So all I can expect is we're gonna get, this is our next specialty change unit. They did it last time with what's her face. Wait, I actually can't remember her name. It's like the 3-star water mage that has frostbite on her kit. You know, it's probably in character. All I know is me forgetting her name is like in character for her, probably. But wait, who is it? Who is it? Wait, no, let me check the journal. Sidetrack. I don't have her unlocked. Jenna. Yes, her. Yeah, she has this thing on her kit. Like, she has a pretty strong kit actually, but nobody really uses her for some reason. Probably because she's like a cleave unit with 101 base speed, right? But yeah, I mean, I just expect this to be the next specialty change here. So now onto the artifacts. I'll just go over these really quickly. Rise of the Monarch now gives 10% defense to all allies, which, I mean, that's a pretty solid upgrade. It makes it obviously better than before. Are you going to use this over Arius if you're running 1 knight though on your team? No. But one interesting it does do is if you do have 2 knights, right, you get 20% increased defense for your whole team, which is pretty substantial. So if you are in a situation where you're running 2 knights, or I guess maybe this is an potential arrow well artifact, you can, you know, toss Rise of a Monarch on and get the 20% decrease with Arius and this. Yeah. Maybe it'll get used. Probably will get used. But yeah, nothing too game-changing here. So now we have Dux Noctis. So they gave some of the attack baseline, and they increased the max attack you get to. This artifact's pretty much only used on Commander Pavel, and it'll probably still only be used on Commander Pavel. So this is just a slight Commander Pavel buff for the people that use him, I guess. But otherwise, you know, are you going to use Dux Noctis over Guiding Light on most of your rangers? No, you are not. It's like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal, honestly. Well, I guess it is a big of a deal if you do use Commander Pavel. But yeah, not really a substantial update. So Steadfast Gatekeeper, I don't know why they changed it to do this, because if we just go to the journal really quickly here again, go to the artifact journal and click on, wait, no, is it a night one? Wait, it might be a night one. Where is it here? Ah yes, this artifact already exists. Decreases damage suffered by elite or boss monsters by 30% at max limit break, and this is free. So what they've done is they've given us the 4-star equivalent, which increases the defense of all of your allies by 5%, and you get up to 20% damage reduction. And it's like, what? Why? Why would they remove this unique effect, right? Like, this effect doesn't exist anywhere else in the game for an artifact, and give it an effect that already exists in the game at a lesser effect? Like, what? How does that work? I don't understand. Smaugate? Did you forget that this exists? Sword of Ursa? Azura? What? Huh? 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 I don't know. Let's see. Steadfast Gatekeeper is an artifact that had limited usage and struggled to showcase its full potential, even when all conditions were met. I mean, like, yeah, nobody was using it before, so my complaints aren't really met anything. But, like, to enhance its usability, we made it worse than an existing artifact? Like, what? How does that make sense? Like, to increase its usability, we made it worse than an existing artifact. The fact, like, I don't know. But, you know, you can recall it, I guess. You'll get your EXP back, and that's nice, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's got all this information. And this is the final change here, and it's kind of silly again. So right now, when you're restricted, you cannot have your combat readiness increased, and you cannot have your combat readiness decreased, which I think kind of actually balances the debuff pretty well, because if you can't, like, get restricted and then get pushed back by something, it just kind of, like, it would feel not so great if you could get, like, restricted and then be unable to push yourself up. But this is a insanely strong buff to ML Rwana plus Peyra, because what ML Rwana S3 does is it pushes back your whole team and it resets your cooldowns. So you're going to be unable to gain combat readiness, and you're going to have your cooldowns reset. So this is a buff to solely that gameplay, essentially. You know, maybe some other stuff. Maybe people would pick Cerise now. Oh, probably not, but maybe. It is just like, did they need to do this? Like, was anybody complaining about how restrict, you know, was an annoying debuff? Because, like, I think, like, it was pretty well balanced when it had this effect on it, but without it, it is definitely a stronger debuff. But do debuffs need to be stronger? Like, debuffs are already very strong in the current meta for RTA at least, and it's like, well, gee, I guess I'm gonna be dealing with even stronger debuffs now. I don't know. We'll see if it's actually super impactful. I think it will be fairly impactful though. But regardless, that's the end of these patch note reviews. It wasn't as structured as I thought it would be, but it was just me talking for 30 minutes. So thank you for listening, I suppose. And I said I was going to show builds for the units I think I would use, and I did in fact do that. It was only Lionheart Sirmia that I think is going to be relevant, like I mentioned at the beginning. But regardless, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and I shall see you soon here.